It costs an arm and a leg, right?
That's how much does an arm cost if you're an
Oh.
octopus?
Oh, you can grow them back though. So
1/8.
Right. So if you can grow back arms are a lot cheaper.
yeah, oh yeah, definitely.
It's so like in a sci-fi setting, if you're like an android that can grow back arms, even if you have two of them,
Here you are, have one.
they're still
Feast
probably a lot
on
more
it.
expensive. They're still probably a lot more expensive than octopus who have 8 arms and can do with one missing for a while. Or can they? You think if an octopus loses an arm, it's going to be like kind of like hung up for a little bit of a while, or it's just like losing like
Yeah.
a penny on the subway or whatever. It's like I'm not picking that up. You just
Probably
let
just
it
fall out
go.
of bed, you think it's there and it's just not. You're like, fuck, right, I lost that one.
Yeah. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
We're bipedal and we have 2 legs. If I lost a leg, I'd be kind of a bit,
Yeah, but you would know that you aren't going to get it back, though.
So, okay, all right, yeah, I know. But even if I did know I was going to get it back, it would still be like a big inconvenience on my leg. I mean, losing one leg to an octopus, is that still really disconvenient? Like, I mean, I feel like they're designed to be moving with 8. So if you lose the one, it's like an octopus with a limp.
I think that they're pretty good at adapting to their surroundings. So I think if they
pretty
lost
good at
one, they'd be okay for a while, right? But
Yeah.
if we lost an arm, that's huge. That's
Octodad knows how to shuffle things around. He knows how to juggle things around. I mean, losing a finger, on the other hand, okay, I'd still go to work.
Well, I don't know. You've got like lefty and righty, right? What if he loses his massively righty like arm, the one he likes to grab shit with?
his primary
Hmm.
arm.
Yeah. Do
Reminds
they have a
reminds me of that.
primary?
Reminds me of that Arrested Development joke. See, the character loses his left arm, so now he's all right.
Oh.
They go to the hospital.
Oh.
The doctor says, "How is he, doctor?" He says, "He's all right." He says, "Well, he didn't lose his left arm, but he's like, I hate this doctor. he's too literal."
Oh.
And welcome to the Unmovable RPG podcast with Jay Underwood.
And I'm Chris.
And I'm Sandra Rosner.
And on today's episode, we talk about animal familiars, reskinning magic, and making barbarians interesting, going beyond the madness.
For some reason, in a lot of the games that I've been playing over the past few years, there's always the one player who wants the animal familiar that will break your campaign. So, for our 2 resident DMs, I'd love to hear how you've either circumvented the game breaking mechanic or have integrated it to make your player happy and the rest of the table also.
Well, in my games, there are a lot of animals. Players love their animals, and usually I build things around that idea. Now, there are 2 kinds of, I guess, animal companions, ones that are functional and ones that aren't, right? The ones that aren't, usually they're left at home, they can have them, hanging out at the camp or whatever, or when they go on adventures, they usually leave them with someone else. And then there's the functional ones, and they sometimes can be problems, but often I suspect what kind of problems they're going to be, and I adapt towards them. So can you think of it?
The difference between functional and non-functional animals is like the difference between cats and dogs. Cats totally non-functional. They just loaf around all day. You know what I mean?
Sandra, like, what sort of problems have you thought about, like, in terms of how animal companions could be problematic?
A lot of the common things is to use them for scouting. So, you can have your entire, jungle fight encounter that you think can be happening depending on how the team goes, completely circumvented because I'm going to send my jungle cat to this area to go find the thing. Or if you have a flying companion, I'm just going to fly over the danger and things like that. So I'm always interested to know how DMs readapt to that, because you want to give your player agency to use that really cool animal familiar that's become part of integral to their character. But at the same time, they can do a number on this carefully crafted map that you've laid out if they just fly over top of it.
Now, you need to accompany that with something else, and they'd have to be able to either speak with the animal, because they can't give exact details if they can't speak the animal's language, right?
Well, there have definitely been occasions where see through their eyes. I'm trying to think. There's certain spells where depending on homebrews and whatnot, where you've given them some limited sight, some telepathy, some kind of communication capabilities. Otherwise, I guess maybe that's a good dividing line. Like, do you allow your players, Chris, to have like bonds with the animals that can actually communicate these kind of details, or is that how you limit the destructive nature of such animal companions to the overall idea?
It really depends on if it's a class feature, then yes, then they can. But if it's like, I get a hawk and I train them for like 80 days, right? Well, you're not going to be able to speak to it unless if you actually use a spell or anything like that. You can't see through its eyes. So it really depends on how they acquired it. If it is like a naturally occurring thing in their class, but if it isn't, then very limited use. And kind of a rule that I sometimes do is kind of like the first time it works, the second time it works, the third time it doesn't come back, and then they're like, oh, where is it? And that kind of spurs on a whole another kind of like a side adventure as well.
I love it. You're still building in consequences, so you can't overuse something that is potentially very cool for a player.
It could come back. It could come back. It could come back with an arrow through its like wing, and then you're like, oh,
that's some high drama.
Like this is it's you got to consider these things as like almost like people too, right? Like you just don't be like, oh, go and check it out without any concern of whether or not it's going to come back.
Because if you send your animal companion into danger all the time, you're not going into danger. So consequences.
Yeah, I'm feeling that the discussion is sort of gravitating around issues of sort of power, limitations, and with limitations, you also have to be careful about players perceiving those limitations as punishments and whatnot. I did think of an interesting story that happened once when I was running the Mad Mage adventure path from 5e, and I have problems with dark vision that doesn't make dark scary, and fly spells and things like that. And for this particular campaign, the Speak with Plants spell was being overused to track a particular NPC, and for some reason, I don't know if I picked it up from maybe a Futurama episode or something like that, or was it if it was original or whatnot.
I know where this is going.
Whenever the characters would cast the Speak with Plants spell, plants were always just screaming. plants are inherently in a state of like abject terror, like grass being trodden upon all the time. They're just every time they cast to Speak with Plants, plants were just screaming all the time.
As a player, I would love that. If that's where it came to, if I was overusing a spell and they just start screaming at me, I would be delighted.
I think I know where it comes from now. It just came to me. There's a Jack Handy Deep Thoughts. He's an old SNL thing. They were hilarious, and I don't think I'm quoting it verbatim, but it was something along the lines of, would we be so cavalier about cutting trees down if they were screaming when we did it, or something like that? It's like, oh no,
Jack Handy.
Yeah, amazing.
A legend.
Yeah, if you find yourself falling off the top of a tall building, just go limp and act like a mannequin, because somebody on the street might grab it, because hey, free mannequin. Anyway, back to I always like to try and say yes or yes but, and I think the animal companion situation is a classic case of yes but situation, because players oftentimes want animal companion for sort of flavor, and then in a way they kind of sneak in a few additional skills to their character skill set. Whereas from the DM perspective, you're thinking, I want to put you in situations that's going to make you, the character, really cool. And when your character is using an animal companion to all of these, is it really making your character all that cool? Perhaps from a player perspective, it is. But oftentimes, if you're trying to create an encounter in which an enemy ambush is coming, and every night at camp, the character casts the bird familiar to fly around the camp and survey the thing. I mean, that's not unlike a wizard casting alarm every night. So there's ways to get around that. You craft scenes in which the encounter is going to rely upon other things, and this is where some design balance becomes necessary, because if every time they feel like they use the bird and it never finds something, well, then they're just going to feel disappointed. So you need to encourage sometimes that the bird does work, and then they feel kind of rewarded for letting the bird is rewarded for doing what it needs to do. But at the same time, what's going to happen behind the scenes is, now that this player has sort of a bird familiar that is acting as a scout, the DM is going to craft encounters around ways to get around the bird encounter, which may not be explicitly told to the players, but that's just going to happen.
I sometimes see
unless you're following a set
see
path.
like these kind of scout things as just another way for me to deliver more lore, right? And that's something that I have way too much of and always want to give the players. So often when they say, "Oh, can I have someone scout and see what's going on?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead. You can see what's going on, but you don't know everything, and you're gonna discover more as you go along." So I'm a little bit, I guess, more forgiving when it comes to having animal companions, just because they like it. They like another piece of themselves in it, and also if they can speak with it, it gives me another opportunity to give them some sort of, like, I don't know, some Australian accent. I don't know.
Mounts bring additional difficulties sometimes as well. If one player has a mount, then all of a sudden here comes the cavern. What do you do? Like, just put it up on a hitching post outside the cavern, and enter
See you later.
See you later.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all wonderful ideas, and definitely helps to circumvent, because other players around the table can kind of start regretting their decision not to have familiars when they see this really cool animal doing all these amazing things. So I love that Chris's idea of bringing more lore into the group, for example, that benefits everyone, and everyone can feel really good about what that familiar has brought to the team.
It's funny because just recently, last Saturday when I played a game, I kind of had a similar discussion with my girlfriend after the session, because in the game, her character has a raven, but then another person wanted 2 dogs, and then another person wanted an eagle, right?
Veritable
Right.
menagerie happening
But
here.
Mom, I want one.
So initially, the person with the eagle, well, it wasn't part of their class, so I kind of like sidelined it quite quickly right in the start. Like it got injured, and that was kind of like that's one of the reasons why they went to the temple, right, to get it cured, right? And the dogs, they're like, "Oh, can we have the dogs follow the scent of so and so?" And I was like, "Okay, make a roll," and of course they rolled low, so I was like, "Nope, the dogs go in the opposite direction and start playing in the field." And they're like, "Oh."
You have golden retrievers.
The cutest adventuring party ever. I'll allow it.
But then the player character that had the raven as part of their druid class companion, they were able to keep it the entire time. They were able to use it and utilize it how they would like. But the other ones were just kind of like, it's a different flavoring, or a different kind of like another feature of the player's character, but not of the class.
Inherent characteristics of the golden retriever familiars are inherent zoomies and who wants to be a good boy. Good boy aura.
And
good at fetching balls.
And barking at the wall for no reason. Like,
right, exactly.
That could be a thing too, right? Where it's like you have a dog that won't stop barking during the night, and no one can get sleep because of it.
Yeah. There you go.
Make them a problem.
Yeah, everyone has fatigue or like exhaustion the next day because of the dog familiar. Everyone loses like a -2 to their die rolls, or like down 1 dice or something like that.
Your next quest is to rehome it to a nice place.
Later,
oh no!
But then later you realize that this entire time you've been haunted by ghosts, and no one but the dog has been able to sense it.
Oh,
Ghost
if only
cast.
we'd known in session 2.
Yeah, ghost cast.
Well, I thank you both for giving a lot of really great ideas, because not only is this great for DMs, but it's great for players too, who have never had the opportunity to play with an animal familiar and have been maybe perhaps reluctant to, because it's not part of their class, or it's not something that they're comfortable with trying to control both their own character and their familiar at the same time, because it can bring a lot of complication to combat as well. So this gave a lot of wonderful ideas to have a companion that you can just RP with and heighten your experience.
The balancing act of an animal familiar. What would be the worst possible animal familiar?
Ooh. An eel in a desert related campaign.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that's high maintenance.
Pet rock.
No, that's easy. That's easy.
Now, if I had an evil DM, not naming names, I would say that anything that can misbehave is going to misbehave a lot.
Go banana.
Go banana.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to our next topic, which is reskinning magic. And if anyone is not familiar with the concept of reskinning, that is simply taking the narrative choices that a player makes without changing the sort of mechanical characteristics of a spell. Let us say I cast some sort of fire magic at my enemy. The rules state that I roll a 1d6 for damage. That's all fine and good, but why does it have to be fire magic? Is that essential? Can it be something like celestial starlight coming down? Could it be something like the character just happened to be lucky and happened to notice a bottle above the table, and so he threw a small pebble that ricocheted off the wall, knocking the bottle onto the top of the head, doing the same amount of damage? Some rules seem to insist that fire does something against certain combat, enemy resistances, and what have you, but can that not be changed if it's still a fire magic that's being cast, but it's reskinned to something else? You could still use the fire resistances in the handbook, and so on and so forth. So what are some interesting ways? What are some interesting difficulties that one might be able to use this concept of reskinning of magic? Chris, you want to take it away?
Well, on that point, I am pretty fluid when it comes to magical damage types. Especially when it comes to like a character magic theming. So like if you're an ice mage and you want to do fireball and make that into a frostball, yeah, sure, go ahead. Or arc of lightning, you can change it into like a string of thorny jutting icicles. Yeah, sure, be my guest. But if it's like celestial light or things like that aren't actual types in the game, then I think I would be a little bit more cautious to allowing that, because then it would be strange if an enemy had resistance to that specific energy type, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like because if you keep it within the normal types of damage, that's fine, right? Because then there'll be that dragon that has the fire resistance or frost resistance. But if it's celestial light damage and that's not even a real typing within the game, and then the enemy has celestial light resistance, that would seem a little strange, I think.
Well, this is where reskinning can become, so the celestial light damage in this sense is essentially fire magic.
Okay.
You're just using it as a narrative focus.
That's entirely fine then. Okay, as long as it sticks within the same like damage typings, I'm fine. But if you're making something up, then unless if everyone's aware of it and it's a I don't know what I'm saying then in that sense.
Well, one of the characters that I've always wanted to make, and we've talked about this before off recording, is a character like Domino from Deadpool 2. A character whose basically her ability is luck. And so if we were using a 5e rule set and I was playing the sorcerer and I had all these abilities, burning hands, magic missile, what have you, I would love to have a GM that would be able to support in such a way that, I simply I see the goblin horde attacking. In a panic, I turn to run, and as I trip over my animal golden familiar that's behind me, and I fall to the ground, it freaks out and then manages to cause a lot of damage and chaos, which is essentially the magic missile spell going off. And does my character even know that they're casting? Is it just there's so many playing exciting moments that could come out of that situation, but it would require a lot of sort of buy-in and understanding from DM and player.
Not to mention, though, that is a lot of consideration for every time you cast a spell. You have to consider this this chain of events that will lead to the damage being done. I can imagine it'd be a lot of fun, but that is a lot of consideration.
A lot of
Well,
bandwidth. Yep.
Well, my argument is that is what gets people sometimes out of the page. If I'm simply and more invested in the story and in the setting, and not even just the setting as in the RPG setting, but like the setting in which the battle is taking place. So if I'm simply rolling magic missile, X many dice depending on my level, well then that it just gets a little bit old, and okay, here comes the beams of light again, pew 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 pew, but if every time I get into a new encounter, I've got to sort of really come up with something unique and exciting, then I'm going to be very much engaged in the DM's descriptions of what's going on, and what have you. But it's just one example, of course.
I'm going to put
And
forth too, because we're almost kind of playing with a concept like that in our group, Jay, with the kind of time stop ability that I've I'm playing around with this new character. And I feel like though that the reskinning of some of these things can be as much fun for the player as it is for the DM, because where I was coming up with certain ideas to try to bend this magic into the scenario, you came up with some other ideas for it too, like depending on whether the role was great or not. The concepts you came up for the penalties and whatnot were truly unique, and I would not have come up with them on the fly myself. And likewise, I feel like I came up with a lot of concepts for this so far that you weren't considering when I pitched the idea to you. So reskinning really has a potential to kind of engage everybody at the table, not just the player.
Yes, I think we need to unpack a little bit of what you're talking about here. Maybe you want to talk about the situation in particular. Essentially, what I was trying to do was, I felt that you as a player were being reluctant to go so big with the magical spell that you were doing, and I felt that you could have gone a little bit bigger. So I was adding additional narration to what you do, and listeners are probably very, very confused at what's going on here.
yeah,
I play in a very as a
myself included.
homebrew rule. We play in a homebrew situation in which magic has been broken down into a sort of core elements. Whereas there are no spell lists, there are nothing like that. So basically, a character concept they come up with whatever the thing that they think they want to do. Similar to X-Men. I I control magnetism, or I control fire, or the thing that they want to do, and then they can just run with it. And I'm happy to let them run with it. However, there's going to be restrictions, and magic is an unwieldy beast, and every time they use it, they're not quite sure what the negative repercussions of it going to be, because they're channeling this like kind of deep dark energy or whatnot. Sandy, do you wish to elaborate?
Yeah. So basically, in the example I was giving, I was simply just trying to save somebody who's about to fall off. You know, I want to say what?
Crashing airship.
Yeah. Yes.
Which,
Crashing
which,
to their
which,
death.
which happened to be a kind of a futuristic kind of like a yuppies yacht that they were having a little midday picnic, and they were two of the like as this battle poured over onto this sort of 8-person luxury airship. Their picnic got disrupted, and the two of them became innocents involved in this melee that were also falling off the ship, and the barbarian had to keep kind of grabbing them and picking them up and pulling them back on the ship. It was chaos.
Yeah. I hope they have insurance. Honestly, I feel a little bad for them. But yeah, my concept was simply, a Hail Mary to try to grab somebody who's about to fall off the ship. And because I had a really decent roll, Jay basically went, "No, actually, you've just altered the timeline." And it's like, "Wait, what? I can do that?" And it was not that I didn't want to alter the timeline. I just didn't know if I could. I didn't know if that was game breaking. If it was, because I tend to be a bit more of a reserved player. Like I want bad things to happen, because that's where the story moments and the story beats are for me as a writer, as a player, as a even like somebody who's a reader or a watcher. I love when the what's called the dark moment of the souls. Those are my favorite parts of the story, and those are going to be the most memorable. So I like kind of creating those by having somewhat weaker characters. But in that moment, being able to literally alter the timeline for those 5 seconds, that was incredible. Like I am so into this character now that I know that she can do that in a good role scenario. Like talk about like completely invested now, and we're what, session 2 on that?
Session 2, yeah. Yours character session kind of 1.5, I guess.
Yeah.
Your character is 0. The conversation that we had about your character in session 0 was essentially that you wanted to be somebody that could like kind of see ripples in the timeline. You're something of a Prince of Persia character, and we hadn't quite used your magic yet in the setting, and therefore you were maybe somewhat struggling with how I'm going to narrate this moment, and then I could. Based on the talk that we had, I presume this is sort of what you wanted, and then we just went with it, and you were like, "Yeah, that's it." And then
Yep.
we kind of found the character voice. But essentially, what you did was that your die roll was making sure that the character didn't fall off the boat, and you succeeded, and therefore they didn't fall off the boat. But we narrated it as if you saw that if you did this thing, and you saw a ripple in the timeline, such that you can kind of counteract the situation, and that was your magical ability.
That's awesome.
I feel like this is the joy of reskinning, is the collaboration. Like, it's not just up to the player. It's not just up to the DM to carry that narrative moment. Together, you carry the narrative moment and make it like exponentially better.
I think just the collaboration between the player and the DM is very important, but also you're kind of like pushing each other, to be cooler and to bring that that wow moment.
I remember that there was a character that you had skinned to a great effect with Harmony, Chris.
Oh, Harmony, one of my favorites. The celestial druid that couldn't lie, would never lie. She would like create beads of like constellation like patterns in the air that would manifest into spells, and actually drew it a whole list of like a whole, I don't know, a whole bunch of these like constellations, and named them all, and that was a whole lot of fun.
I think it also gives players a chance to sort of really stretch their imagination when they come up with an idea that maybe their character is centered upon. Another one of my players by the name of David came up with a character who was something of a kind of mad scientist, Dr. Frankenstein figure, who all of his spells were skinned into sort of like scientific experiments. So his like far sight spell would be like he would inject some serum into his eyeball, or literally perform like a minor surgery in the moment, and so it became like he was full of all these like scars and tattoos and whatnot, and so sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
By reskinning or exploring this concept of reskinning based on like it's essentially you're abandoning, in a sense, or leaving the option to use the descriptions of the spell that are in these player handbooks for whatever system you're using, but then also adding the opportunity to bring in like potential genre elements on what you're doing. Let's say we're playing in a horror setting now. Well, Magic Missile could be skinned completely differently, and what I'm casting is a series of termites that dig out from underneath my skin, fly out, and then bury themselves into the skin of the creatures. And now that could be simply in the combat a die roll of the casting of Magic Missile, but then the player can describe it in kind of grotesque detail, or the DM can describe it in grotesque detail, and then the combat can then perhaps change. Let's say a turn later, the DM has this idea now. Oh well, now they've all have these strange termites infested into their skin. Why don't they grow now these kind of acid-filled boils begin to form on the back of the necks of these monsters. That then, once you kill them, they burst, and you've got area damage, and the combat can become sort of dynamic and change that way, based on the character skinning idea.
Yeah, I'm big into like picking a theme and delving really into it, like doing a lot of research and like basically trying to impress everyone. I'm kind of big into those kind of those creative themes, and I also like to. I believe in like limitations. Limitations often can push creativity, and like there are times when I have like in front of me a whole list of spells that I just don't take because it simply just doesn't fit into the theme. But then it's sometimes finding creative uses for the limited amount of spells that I have that end up being the real big, like the showstoppers, really. So
In the game that I run, I have a concept called fade.
Mm-hmm.
Which Sandra, would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I was gonna say that like limitations just tend to be like the bread and butter of those really good campaigns because with Fade, you have almost a high risk, high reward kind of a magic system. You don't overuse it because you know that a really bad roll is gonna have like altering consequences to your character. It's not just, oh, I failed to launch magic missile at the target, I lost my turn. If you have like a critical fail on those, there you lose memories, you have physical, manifestations happen. It, we always play with the concept of magic being tied to the character in some way and their fade being tied to the character. So if you want to be controlling somebody, maybe you get controlled in return, with your fade, but there's always a like a counterbalance force. So I'm absolutely in love with the idea of limitations because every action you make with this grand power is going to have those consequences that make it so crucial to investment in the story and your character. Like if you know that casting this spell could literally kill your character, depending on a really great roll or a really bad roll, you're really going to think twice about whether you're going to use it in this moment.
If a spell kills your character with a really great roll, that's a really sadistic character choice.
Yes. Actually,
we have So the concept of fade is similar to the kind of the boon and bane concepts that were introduced in a later edition of the Player's Handbook with 5e. But what it's done is it's essentially just reskinning character mods in a way that if a character is born with an innate magical ability, then every time they cast a spell, there's a potential negative thing that happens, and that will be talked about with the player from session 0. Oftentimes, the player might just say, "Oh, I leave it up to you, the GM." And
Mhm.
one character who's in our recent campaign, the way his fate, as we call it, takes effect is whenever he casts his sort of teleportation magic, it makes the room cold, or it makes him cold, and literally his around his eyes, and the further the distance that he wishes to teleport, well, then limits his ability to see because it's literally freezing his eyeballs. And he wanted to cast a teleportation of one character from a great distance, and the consequence was that he lost an eye. The eye froze so much that it shattered, and now he has to wear like an eye patch and whatnot. And so he's reticent to use it, and then that becomes, and the character's totally cool with that, and therefore, but it gives him some limitations. But it also gives the DM and the player flexibility within the rules of, say, the teleportation spell.
Yeah, and what a story too, right? Like,
Yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
Another example of this was one character whose fade was simply that every time their magic was being able to control the thoughts of other people in a way, in order to sort of like use some sort of charisma magic, and really nothing bad seemed to be happening to them. But what was happening to them was they were just slowly developing a form of magical cancer inside their body. And by the end, once the campaign was over, they realized that despite everyone else going on to live long, kind of happy lives, having kind of saved the day and what have you, this character now was riddled with stage 4 terminal magic cancer for having used all that magic, and that was their sort of the repercussions of using all that sort of like charm magic that they did. And it led us to a really kind of powerful and emotional end scene of their characters sending them off with, protecting their husband and daughter and what have you. And yeah, so there's lots that you could do with this. Well, that sounds to be something of a wrap up. I hope that listeners will go out there and find ways to explore how to reskin their magic. And not only magic, but think about how we can reskin other things, which brings us to our next topic. And quick break.
Director's cut.
Commercial break, yes. And we're back.
All right. Welcome back. The Barbarian, a champion of the savage. Sorry, let me start again. The Barbarian, a champion of the savage wilderness, wielding their trusty chipped tree trunk of a weapon and sputtering nonsensical among saliva and intangible ire. Conan the Barbarian, Wulfgar, Kratos, Guts from Berserk, He-Man, Ayla from Chrono Trigger, the Hulk. These are great examples. But could
Arnold
they be more?
Schwarzenegger, get to the chopper.
Get to the chopper. It's not a magical tumor.
Yeah. Take it back to the carpet. Take it back. I'm a cop, you idiot. All right.
Yes, could they be more?
I'm just excited about the fur loincloth here. I mean, talk about the most scantily clad characters in the game, right?
The Vallejo Barbarian. Ooh la la.
Flex.
Meow. All right. So what are we talking about with the Barbarian here, Chris?
Well, we're talking about reskinning the Barbarian, or Barbarians Beyond the Madness.
Beyond the madness.
Basically taking the concept of a barbarian and seeing if we can push it further beyond just, the typical Conan the Barbarian, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, or the typical sort of like berserker class rage barbarian, which is indeed very fun to play, but can't we do more with that? Why is the barbarian always the thug?
Yeah. All right. Do you guys have any ideas?
Now, I think before we get fully into this, we have to explain the idea of trope. That trope isn't bad. In fact, tropes developed because they were really good. They were elements that really appealed to somebody along the scope of the genre and became overused. So they've become tired, they've become worn. So how do we take something like the Barbarian, which I feel like if you ask any random TTRPG player, you're going to hear they're stoic, they're dumb, they're brutish, they're quick to violence. But how do you play a barbarian that isn't the tired old alcoholic, save for because we love them, we love the characters that were, but what are we going to play right now?
Right, well, I think we should think about what are the essentials for, like, say, a barbarian class. What makes a barbarian?
Well, it's. I mean, we can go all the way back to the actual roots of even the word barbarian, and I believe it comes from something of like a Roman Gallic type of thing, where they believe that that's just how the foreign language sounded to the Romans, where they would right, and that's where the word barbarian kind of came from. It's like the foreign other. And that does seem to influence a lot of this sort of trope-like behavior that you were talking about, Sandra. That we have to be a barbarian. If you imagine it in your head, you're going to think it's wearing some sort of like wild skins or has some sort of Viking likeness, or is like an ogre or whatnot. And other than the somewhat problematic implications that might have, barbarian seems to imply some sort of foreign wild otherness that's there, that comes in and is different from the kind of so-called like civilized world of the game setting or something like that.
So it sounds like at the heart we're dealing with somebody who maybe bucks the social trends. So you're not going to necessarily find a barbarian going to the corner store, for instance. So I think we can all agree
you haven't been to my corner store.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
There's some squirrely characters at mine as well. But that, I guess, that would kind of lead us to what other kind of, like, what examples do we have even in our current world that we might be like barbarian adjacent? Would we talk about the loners in the woods as maybe a barbarian type? Can we talk about, like, somebody who's gone off to live in the wilderness, built their cabin, obviously they're strong from chopping wood and things like that. Could we reskin somebody who's like that, a mountain man, into a barbarian?
Thoreau's Walden, reskin Thoreau's the Barbarian. Sitting out in a lake house, throwing axes at trees.
He's thoughtful, though. He's thoughtful.
Well, the way that I take barbarians is that they are one way and then they're another way. Like in terms of like statistics or in terms of classes in a lot of these games, it's kind of like they have a normal state and then they have a kind of like advanced state where they can't really think of things, right? So ways that I've thought about perhaps reskinning it is maybe someone who's possessed, right?
Oh,
Like
interesting.
instead of like rage, they have like rounds of like possession, right? And like the spirit takes over, and then that's what caused them to become like a killing machine, right? Just kind of like it's not actually anger; it's just another force outside of them to push them this way.
Mhm.
So you can take this too to like religious avatar level, things like
Yeah,
that. Anything where they just suddenly become possessed of
it,
power that
it
is outside of themselves and
could be
just
beneficial or malicious.
interesting.
The monk barbarian, the sorcerer barbarian, the wizard barbarian, the paladin barbarian, all this is possible. If people are looking to implement this in a set system such as 5e or maybe Pathfinder, it is necessary for them to understand the function that the barbarian fits within the combat economy of the system. And it's essentially getting beyond what we were just describing earlier as the barbarian being like the sort of the narrative and trope implications of a barbarian. On a mechanical side, the barbarian is the frontline, heavy, pulling aggro guy.
The glass cannon.
The glass cannon, in a sense, yeah. And if that's taken away, then some systems may break down. And so,
Mhm.
even though the skinning may be taking place, that still has to be somehow preserved, in a sense, on a mechanical level. So players and GMs should be careful about that.
Mm.
It's interesting. I started thinking about folklore things too that you can bring into here. Like by Chris's definition, like a lycanthrope would be a barbarian
Yeah.
kind of class you could play with as a reskin. That's that kind of opens up a lot of avenues if you don't want to just be the burly, half naked guy who just charges into danger, thoughtlessly.
Another one that I thought about was a drug addict, right? You have a number of
Mm,
hits a day you can use, and then you just become so wildly unpredictable that you become scary in some ways.
that's a lot of fun.
I was about to say at the start of your call, I was about to make a quip about saying the barbarian is me on a Monday morning, but then once you start talking about like wild naked men and drug addicts, I was like, wait a minute, maybe I shouldn't. Anymore.
That's
No,
more your
that's not,
Saturday.
that's not me. Yeah, that's my Saturday night, Sunday morning. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, yeah.
Just another thought though. Like you ain't the 6 foot tall Conan. You're just like a 5'4" like Joe Pesci type character. Like finely tailored suit with like no armor, switchblades, and brass knuckles and steel-toed boots instead of a giant a giant great axe.
What am I, a clown to you? Do I make you laugh?
Exactly right.
Like get some of people's faces and stuff like that.
There's such rich RP potential.
Yeah, yeah. The Joe Pesci barbarian. I want to play this
Joe
game
Pesci
right now.
Now we seem
Wet bandits.
I feel like we're pulling up a lot of male examples, and I feel like every barbarian, barring one, that I've ever played with has been male. So for female TTRPG players, can we come up with any ideas that might feel distinctly them without having to like? I love jumping genders. I've played male characters, female characters, all along different sexualities and things. But if you wanted to play a barbarian that was distinctly female because that's what you tend to gravitate towards, can you come up with any ideas there that might lead our listeners to some new ideas?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is Karlach from Baldur's Gate 3, who is
Hmm.
a tiefling barbarian who's sold their soul to an archdevil or whatnot, and is one of the most awesome NPCs in the game, or playable NPCs in the game. Yeah, very cool, very cool.
Definitely.
I don't think any of the things that we were referring to are mutually exclusive to
No.
that gender. Yeah, being and it can skin over either way. Doesn't matter.
I'm sure that women can also be possessed and drug addicts too. So
Yeah, actually.
Speaking of
In
my corner store,
yeah, living in the West Coast right now.
yeah,
um
that place
Hey.
is off the hook.
Vancouver ain't clean either. So
it's a little wild out here right now.
It's sort of like a dirty Winnipeg. No, no, sorry.
Oh,
no,
jeez.
that's something entirely different, Jay. Sorry.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
won't get
No,
into
no,
that
no.
here.
but it bears mentioning that, you know, even the concept of rage and, you know, losing control of oneself, it doesn't have to be distinctly you know, a masculine strength
No.
based thing. Like we can go into madness, we can go into passion even, and things like that in our barbarian characterizations and our skinnings. So, you know, instead of just following that one, what felt like a very narrow trope, if you know, pull up the wealth of examples, it feels like we have such a well to draw from if we just, you know, take a glance outside of what's commonly available.
Mm.
uh, are you saying there's a certain period in which every
There
cycle a
there
woman
could
finds
perhaps
in which rage is
once in a blue
born?
moon, absolutely, you got where I was going.
Oh, God, good grief. um But yeah. I mean, we keep going back to rage, but I like what Chris was saying before about like the kind of like there's a self and then there's like an other self. So you know,
Mhm.
perhaps in a sense, like a Jekyll and Hyde type character
Yeah.
is something of a barbarian in a sense, where they become like a totally different person. So they're playing like a doppelganger or like an alter ego of themselves. You know,
I've always wanted to play that kind of like two
yeah.
character.
Like
So that's a
Batman.
cool idea.
Batman is a barbarian, right? There we go. That's the name of the episode. Right?
Batman is a barbarian. I'll leave you with one more thought, though. The barbarian is full of rage, but maybe it's the rage is becoming normal during the normal times. Right?
Mm.
Maybe that's his normal state, but actually he's pretending to be kind all the other times.
Oh, and here's a little extra flash. What if your campaign starts in peacetime? And he becomes the element that incites the war.
Oh.
For some reason, that last cover that Chris made, I was imagining, you know, like your typical kind of like late 18th century, like psychoanalytical office with like the reclining sofa and like this large like a 5e fantasy element barbarian kind of sitting down and putting on like little spectacles and like, you know, talking about his problems and stuff.
It
And like
started with my mother.
that's right, and the whole campaign is told in flashback via like the barbarian's therapy sessions or something like that.
Oh, that's delicious.
Yeah. Well, storming out like a bull through the china shop, we say goodbye to the barbarian.
Arr, arr, arr.
Will he be back?